Hello, welcome to Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 2 Empirical Approach. And our topic is Understanding the Data Collected. For a beginner in the social sciences, the use of the empirical approach means the collection of data that can be subjected to a theoretical analysis. Some kind of data had been rejected for scientific purposes when the emphasis was on a homology between the natural sciences and the social sciences. For example, the data collected by travelers and missionaries was rejected, as also the reasoning rejected historical data. One could not take the reliability of such data for granted. There was a presumption that we could view society as a functioning body that could be explained in terms of timeless laws like the functioning of a natural organism. The idea of social order was one such concept that sought to explain many things. So were the conceptions of system and equilibrium. The only reliable data was the one collected by the trained social scientists in the field by themselves. Even for purposes of comparison, one could legitimately refer only to the work of other social scientists and not to that of the lay person, including the historian. In addition, as more and more observers entered the field, it became apparent that the role of the impersonal observer was almost a myth. The raging debate between Margaret Mead and the Drake Freeman over the data of the Simmons is a case in point. The entry of the conflict theorist challenged the build-up of theory around the concepts of equilibrium and social order. Increasingly, it was felt that the observer tends to observe according to an unconscious and simultaneous process of internal analysis. The ignoring of history became an issue as it became apparent that no society is without a history. Historical documents, life histories, narratives, and the verbatim statements of the observed became more and more part of the observed data in order to overcome the subjectivity of the observer. Instead of logic, the role of institution became more recognized. It has been recognized that to get an intuitive understanding, a researcher has to spend a long time with the people or situation to be studied. By the time the work is complete, along with the factual or material data, the scholar acquires an empathetic understanding by which he or she starts to understand the world through the eyes of the people she or he has spent time with. Things that appear strange in the beginning start to fall in place. While presenting the data, the social scientists have then recast it in the mold of their or general level of conception, understanding shared across the discipline, and trend an intermediate path between the intuitive understanding that is purely personal and the interpretation of data that presents this understanding in the form of a general conceptual framework. What remains important is that Just the collection of data or mere observations does not serve the purpose of understanding. What makes the crucial difference between a good work and a mediocre one is the level of intuitive understanding that a scholar can bring to the data. One important dimension of collection of material for analysis is that in spite of one's best efforts, it is not possible to see and observe each and everything in the field situation. Scholars who believed in the scientific and objective nature of their work abstracted from the particular to the general and concluded that there existed a homogeneous society. In this sense, what was being said was meant for the entire society as a whole. To a large extent, such a method is followed even today, but attempts are made to identify the diversities within groups and cultures. Therefore, everything that does follow a set pattern is not assumed to be deviant but diverse. A method often used, that of statistical frequency, does not always yield results that are true representations of the situation. A statistical frequency often yields only a result, the causes of which have to be deciphered by more qualitative and intuitive deductive analysis. Let us take, for example, the statistical data regarding the sex ratio. A mere statement that there are many missing women in Indian populations does not tell even the beginnings of a story of women's marginalization and trivialization in a male-dominated society. Moreover, even an attempt to go into causality does not lead to uniform causes of the same phenomena. Thus, the neglect and even willful killings of female children and even adult women has many deep-seated and immediate causes, and not all stem from tradition. In fact, the alarming fall in the sex ratio as India is getting more and more modern and global has led many scholars to look for causes not in the past but in the present itself. In most societies, no matter how small and confined, many voices exist. In day-to-day life, people do not act according to already laid down scripts. The normative is often expressed in words, but not followed in deed. Even the normative is being constantly manipulated and modified, as Barth has shown in his book, Cosmologies in the Making. The person who has the repository of oral knowledge has also the means to modify it. Thus, oral traditions transform themselves as they pass from mouth to mouth and from generation to generations and travel across space and time. Another kind of activity of digression may be simple individual convenience or exigency. Most of us are familiar with such adjustments in rituals and performances of daily life, and even life cycle activities like marriage. A third kind of digression may be deliberate, an act of rebellion or defense. Such acts have been studied under the label of contra-culture and often refers to the acts of resistance of marginal groups in society like women and underprivileged. In the next discussion, we will take the topic managing diversities in social research. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self-Learning Podcast.